Thank you, parents and Year 7 students. Hopefully you had a chance to go and speak to our teachers and also our student leaders to learn a little bit more about the technology that is being used in our subject areas. To finish tonight, I would like to take you through some of the practical strategies that you can be using in the home environment, particularly when looking at how can you go about supporting your child working in that digital age. And I know for some parents, phones, social media, technology can be extremely frustrating for you. A little bit more about Generation Alpha. And one thing is that, yes, they have been shaped by their portable devices. And so when we were growing up, we might have had a rattle key, a dummy. For our students, they're actually growing up as a pacifier with a digital device. The tweens are consuming this 4 hours and 44 minutes of screen time per day. Now, this is actually outside of learning. So this is only for entertainment purposes only, and this is what the research is showing us. And it is expected to increase. From a parent's perspective, what our parents are saying is that they're worried about screen addiction, they're worried about cyberbullying, and also the management of friendly content. In addition, Gen Alpha was raised by Gen Y and Gen Z, and that is you. And you've actually also been shaped in the digital world. And we know in a post-COVID world that some of us really embrace the technology, others not so much, but in 2020, everyone was forced to use the technology, and some better than others. Now, students, if you haven't seen this is actually real. And this is a court case over in the States.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take
we're trying to, can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that. I think if you click the up arrow next to this.
Okay, but we all gave it a go. In terms of what are your teens actually using? And here are your three main apps. They're using Snapchat, TikTok, and Instagram. Now, this research was actually taken and statistics was actually from last year in 2020. TikTok has now actually surpassed Snapchat. Students, put up your hand if you're using any one of those platforms. Okay, got a few students in there. In terms of what do these programs do? Well, Snapchat is very much like an instant messenger. One of the key features in that is that you are able then to put a time limit on how long that video or that photo lasts. Your TikTok is like a YouTube, but on a device, and it's very easy for our students to be able to access and also share video content. And Instagram really replaced a written blog for a photo blog, way about being able to share photos. So that's what they're using. Parents, I have the greatest empathy for you. I am also the parent to two teens, and when I share their story with you, I do so with their permission. Do I owe them something when I get home? Absolutely, but they are fully aware of what I'm about to share with you tonight. So this is my daughter. She is 16 years of age, and this is my son, Charlie, who is 14. Why does my son have his tongue out? Because he's been on a mission for the last 4 years to ruin every photo that he is ever in. I am not kidding. And I have just given up on saying anything, so that's what he gets. In terms of what's actually going on with them developmentally, well, one, they're really developing their personal identity and values. We know that they're pursuing their own truth, that they're engaging in risk-taking activities, and we know that they want interdependence from their parents, and most importantly, peer influence and acceptance is so important to them. That's actually what is happening to them now. Generally speaking, girls will access a lot more social media and boys will do a lot more of the online gaming. Now, I come back up to this statistic up here, this 4 hours and 44 minutes, and some of you had quite a bit of shock and horror on your face. By the time that they reach 13 to 17, this actually increases, and what the stats are now showing us now, it's 7 hours and 30 minutes. That is not during learning time in the classroom, that's actually outside of that. So if that shocks you, this is my daughter's screen time on Sunday. Okay, so I need to put this in perspective for you. You can see, and the stats are correct, you can see the top 3 apps that she is using. What I want to put into perspective for you is that when Gen X and Gen Y were actually growing up, this was our entertainment. I used to spend hours on a phone, so every time she is picking that up and she's calling somebody or she's texting, it was the equivalent to her phone. I used to watch a fair amount of TV. That is where they're accessing all of their entertainment from. My children don't even watch TV anymore. That's where they actually get all their entertainment. And we used to listen to a lot of music. They're actually using their device. So I'm not a terrible parent, but there is a little bit of an explanation as to why that figure looks the way that it does. In addition to that, I can also see when she is accessing her phone. And if you have a look here, I would be very upset if I saw anything in between these 2 hours, because that is when she should be at school. But it's actually showing you right down of being able to get the stats on that. So did she share this willingly with me? The answer is no, because I've set up something called family sharing on my iPhone, and there is the equivalent of this with the Android device. It is not as intuitive. So parents, you can also have access of figuring out your screen time on your students and your child's device by setting up, if you've got an iPhone, called family sharing. And that way I'm able to pick up at any point in time and actually have a look at their usage. In terms of sleep, now we know that our children in our teen years, there's actually something that's called a hormonal time shift that has occurred. Your child is not being lazy when they don't want to go to bed or being defiant, is because it actually changes where they become tired a lot later, and it's approximately 2 hours. So in childhood, if you had a bedtime, say, of 9 o'clock, kids are actually, their body clocks is telling them that they want to go to bed, say, at 11 o'clock. Now that is problematic in that school starts at a certain time each morning. So if they're going to bed a lot later but they're still getting up at the same time, they're not getting this required 8 to 10 hours worth of sleep per night. So you do need to put some strategies in place and train them. And so what I have done always with my kids, I don't allow the technology in the bedroom. And so what that means is that both of my children are in a laptop program. Their laptops are never charged in their room. I do allow their phone, but I'm going to show you what I do to their phone. But an iPad is also charged outside of their room. I actually charge it in my bedroom. And be careful, parents, because my kids will go on a digital stealth mission to get their device, because I found out once that they actually waited for us to go to sleep. They snuck into the bedroom, got the device, and then plugged it back in again. So you have to be really careful about where you're actually plugging it in. But the research clearly will show us that it's actually the light from the devices that continues to stimulate the brain. And so you need to be able to train their bodies at wanting to go to bed and trying to get to sleep. But I can guarantee you now that if you leave that device in the room when you think that they are sleeping, I will guarantee you they're not. They're accessing their device. So there is my first strategy. Make sure that you take it out and put it into a safe spot. Now, some of my students are not looking very happy with me at the moment. Number 2, there is something when you set up family sharing called Downtime. I actually control this on my phone. So there is the equivalent also to the into the Android device. But if you can see on my son's phone, I have set it to 9 to 7:30 a.m. What that essentially does is it turns his phone into a brick. It just doesn't allow him to access anything. However, you can choose if you want to allow certain apps, or alternatively, you can actually select apps. So as an example, you might select YouTube, where they can only access it for an hour a day. After they reach the time limit of an hour, it will actually lock them out until the following day. But for my son, that I allow him to have Spotify, and that is the music, because that really does help him to get to sleep. So when I said that I leave the phone in his bedroom, yes, because he actually can't use it for anything else but to listen to music, and also the alarm that's set to go off in the morning. The reason why I set it at 7:30 a.m, he's up a lot earlier than that, but I don't want him accessing all of the social media back before he's actually going to school, because otherwise I can't get him out of the house. So the reason why I do that is that I know he's at school by then, and same rule, that by the time the bell goes, he then needs to switch off his phone. So that is my second strategy for you. Set downtimes and limits on your kid's phone. So if I was then to now show you what does that look like on my daughter's device during the week, what does it look like on my son's device during the week, the time that they're actually on the device does come down significantly. If you have a look in boys in particular, you can see that YouTube is very much on their list. Why? Because they're using it for entertainment purposes. In addition to that, they love to game. So here is my child here gaming. Another strategy for you is that I don't allow gaming in my house from Monday to Thursday during the week. The reason for that is that when you want your child to start to settle down, get ready into that habit of going into bed, if you're allowing them to game, it becomes an overstimulation for them, and it's very hard for them to switch off. What I want my child to do when they come home is that I want them actually focused in on getting their work done, then go and pick something else to do rather than the gaming, because I know it really stimulates him. He can end up in really quite vigorous conversations with his friends, and it's very, very difficult for me to get him off that device and get him home. Now, parents, it's also about you being role models. This is my husband. My husband is also not allowed to game Monday to Thursday. Now, I'm not kidding you with that, because it is about him being a role model as well. It is not fair for poor Charlie to not be allowed on a device when he's watching his father play it as well. So we have this rule. Now, parents, that these pictures are actually staged last night because they shouldn't have been on the device. And when I said, can I please take a picture of you doing this? Do you know what my husband said to me? He said, does that mean I can actually play it now, tonight? And I said, no. And so I went up to my son and I said, can I do it? You know what he said to me? Does that mean I get to play tonight? And I said, no, both of you just go and take the picture. But we have that rule that's set up, and it's also about you being a role model as well. In regards to, oh dear, hopefully it will come up, into the apps that you're actually using. We have to be really careful when we think about these apps, particularly because of these reasons, and particularly of this peer influence and acceptance. When you have a look at something like Instagram, that it can have a very negative impact, particularly on our female students, because really it is not reality. And if you think about a lot of these articles that come out, the Kardashians, the photo editing, and what you can actually do on the device, and for some of our students, it can really promote that negative image of themselves, of what does perfect look like. So we have to be really careful of that. In addition to that, if your child is accessing a device for entertainment or through these social media apps, it's where they're actually getting the majority of their news, nearly all of their news. And what you need to be careful of is that it uses artificial intelligence. So mediocre posts don't really get a whole lot of likes, but extreme views do. So when you think about then what's actually coming up on their feed, it is going to be the most extreme views. It's also taking into account the searches, what they're actually looking up, but in addition to that, it's also now collecting data on their location, even if they're using something as an Apple Wallet of where they're actually making their purchases, and it's using an algorithm that sits behind that in order to draw up what their feed is going to look like. So we need to be really cautious of that. Can anyone tell me the age limit for Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok? It is 13. So I saw quite a few of our students put up their hand to say, I'm using the app. Now, for nearly all of our students here, you're actually 12, you're not 13. So you probably shouldn't be on it. Now, one, why do we have an age limit on that? One, it is because of data, and normally that age in terms of that privacy is 13. But two, it comes down to social maturity. So parents, put up your hand if you've ever been bullied by your child into getting them to download an app because everybody else is doing it, or had that conversation, everybody else is doing it. Yeah. So, parents, what do I say to you? That my daughter was the last child in her grade in year 8 to get Snapchat and Instagram. Every other child had it before her. Now, admittedly, she's quite late in the year as well. She's a March baby. It didn't ruin her social existence, but what it did allow me to do is to actually have the conversation with her as to what would social media look like for her when she turned that appropriate age. And what I say, and I use the analogy, is this, that when these students get their licence, they don't get an automatic licence come when they feel like it, or because their peers are getting that. They get it when they're 16. But prior to that, they actually have to sit a test. And once they get their learners, they need a person in there who is responsible enough in order to be able to teach them on how to operate and drive that car safely. And the same can be said with a phone. It can be just as dangerous. So you need to think through, well, what are going to be your strategies there at being able to use this responsibly? Now, I don't ever sit there and say, well, don't use the technology at all, because it would be the same as that if you would allow them to drive a car, but without having any practice prior to that with your guidance. So my recommendation to you parents is to sit down and negotiate with your child that when they turn the appropriate age, what does social media look like in your house? And for me, I kept it really simple. And it looked like this. By the time that they had turned 13, that in terms of their social media use, that when it came time for me asking at any point, I was allowed to look at their Instagram or their social media feed. And that was it. And I used to do that on a fairly regular basis, but we both came up with that strategy in order to be able to use those platforms. And parents, as a parent community, I plead with you that if all of you were to sit there and agree that our children do not access this until they turn 13, then the peer pressure and the bullying will stop, because it just becomes a norm here at Brisbane South that our students are not on these platforms until they reach 13, until you've been able to negotiate with them some of the rules and responsibilities that go with that as well. So that is my plea to you. Also, parents, if that horse is already bolted and they're already accessing this, what I would recommend is going home tonight to sit there and say, well, now moving forward, what does social media look like for us? What are going to be some of those processes that I have in place of being able to check what you're actually doing online? But remember, it is also about trust. And I always say this, parents, that having a phone, having access to that, it's a privilege, it's not a right. You own the phone, you're paying for the data. Your child does not own that, you do. So I always say back to my children when they've done the wrong thing, it is a privilege, it's not a right. And when they've done the wrong thing, I will remove the technology. But I'm always very careful to make sure that the consequences really match the action. Just be careful, parents, that in this day and age, that our kids are live streaming their video as well. And this is how they communicate with their peers. But I want you to be very careful of what's actually going on in the bedroom. And what you need to consider is put the same rules and processes that you would have in place if you had somebody over in their bedroom in your house. What kind of rules and processes would you have in place? Because it is essentially like inviting somebody into their bedroom. So you need to be fully aware of what is actually going on. Because when you're not fully aware, we end up with cyberbullying. And we know that this is such an issue that is affecting young people today. And unfortunately, anyone who works in healthcare and educators, we have seen firsthand the devastating consequences of cyberbullying. And it's something that we really need to teach our students. Cyberbullying is when there is intent to cause, through an online platform, that harm, that embarrassment, or that hurt. And so we really need to make sure that we're protecting our young people today. But that also means, as your responsibility at home, what processes and procedures do you have in place for your child? This is such a big issue that we are actually holding a completely separate night for this in term 3. And this is solely just focusing around cyberbullying in terms of your online code of conduct. Nothing really to do with the learning here at Brisbane South, but more so just being able to address this issue because it is huge. So ladies and gentlemen, I will just finish with this. Just remember, key messages: remove the tech out of the bedroom. Think about what platform do you have to enable some screen time where you've actually got some control over that. Negotiate the rules and the processes. Make sure that you are setting age limits, and just have a look at when they're in their bedroom, they're live streaming, they're chatting, what processes do you have in place. But ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions or also any feedback, if you scan that code, once it comes up, it will take you to a form. We are able to then create the frequently asked questions and send out maybe a brochure that answers them. Alternatively, it's getting back to you individually, or there's also an opportunity for feedback as to what you'd like that next session to look like. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much.
And thank you, Ms. Sullivan. I'm sure all of you have got many takeaways. For me, I think I'm the generation before my two sons are adults, so I didn't have to go through any of that, but what they did have to do was train me. And I think that was a little bit harder because as they went into the world of technology and mobile phones and devices and apps, I was instructed what apps I needed to have and how I needed to communicate. And every now and again when I catch up with them, they check up on me to see how I'm going. And then they let me know about my screen time, which apps I'm using appropriately or inappropriately. And when I say inappropriately, it's because I'm being a bit daggy and I don't have much of a social presence, so they tell me I need to up that a little bit better. So in terms of both ways, but for our young people, think of it a little bit like me. It's a learning journey. because you do need to learn to use it appropriately. And for our parents and our families here in the room, I hope just through some of the amazing strategies that Ms. Sullivan shared with you, it's just those little things about how you become the learning partner and the partner in this learning and education journey with us, that we can support our young people better. And just want to thank my entire team who you had a chance to meet with tonight, the teachers, the heads of department and exec, for pulling together the night. And I'm sure from the little bit of anecdotal feedback that I got from most of you, it was well appreciated and everyone got some takeaways. So thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for spending the evening with us, and look forward to catching up with you all again next term. Thank you.